Tonight, you're not chasing the day or arguing with your own thoughts. You're walking very slowly along the Nile's edge, where the world is mostly reeds and hush, and even danger learns to move quietly. A paper-thin breeze skims the water. A clay lamp keeps its small, steady heart. And somewhere in the dark, tiny feet practice patience tap like punctuation you can almost fall asleep to. In the next few minutes, 3 small things will keep you company. First, a goddess trying to look ordinary, wrapped in linen and caution. Second, a strange little escort 7 bodies low to the sand, loyal in a way only folklore can be. And third, the feeling of a journey where every doorway is a question and every village is a test nobody announces. If nights like this help you unwind, you can subscribe only if you want more quiet history and myth told gently, like a lullaby with footnotes. And if you feel like it, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love knowing what kind of night this story is joining you in. Now, let your breathing follow something simple. Inhale for 4. Exhale for 6. Let the room stay the way it is. Let the air keep doing its slow, competent work. Because this story doesn't begin with a throne or a battle cry. It begins on a shoreline, with a mother, a secret, and the softest kind of protection. If you've ever tried to walk through somewhere busy while holding a very fragile cup, you already understand the feeling. Your steps become slow, your attention becomes wide. You do not want to spill, and you do not want to be noticed for not spilling. Isis is like that, except the cup is a child, and the liquid is a future, and the crowd is the world. The night around her is thick with quiet human decisions. The choice to be kind, the choice to be indifferent, the choice to shut the door because it is easier than opening it. Behind her, the night gathers 7 shadows, patient, sharp, not dramatic, not noisy, just present like a line drawn in dark ink behind a mother's heel. The 7 scorpions are not decoration. They are protection with a strict posture. Their names are spoken like passwords, and the names are the kind you don't shout, because power does not brag if it wants to stay useful. Tefin, Defin, Mestet, Mestadef, Betet, Thetit, and Metet. 7 names that feel like small clicks of the tongue, like the sound a door latch makes when it decides to hold. They move as one unit, not because they are identical, but because guardianship is a kind of choreography. Each scorpion is a boundary that walks. Each one is a tiny agreement between the mother and the world. You may look, but you may not touch. Their venom is real, yes, but their discipline is the more impressive thing. Venom is common in nature. Restraint is the rare jewel. They keep pace with Isis in the way a shadow keeps pace with a body, and if you listen closely, you can almost imagine the smallest sound of legs moving over sand, like someone turning a page very slowly. In Egypt, the night was never empty. It had schedules. It had routes. Ra had a boat to catch, and even the sun god, with all his bright confidence, still needed to travel through darkness in a proper vessel with a proper crew. If you think modern life loves timetables, the gods were already there first, quietly nodding. And while Ra takes his nightly journey, while prayers and protective words sit on people's tongues like warm bread, Isis keeps traveling. She does not travel as Isis, the shining one, but as a woman with dust on her sandals, a baby close to her chest, and a story she cannot say out loud without inviting a storm. The villages keep coming, a cluster of homes with woven mats and low thresholds, a courtyard where a dog lifts its head and decides whether you're interesting, a small shrine with a painted eye that stares back at envy, because Egyptians like the idea of watching the watchers. Some homes have little amulets near the door, a Weije eye maybe, or a small figure of Base with his squat confidence and his face that looks like he is both guarding the household and making fun of it at the same time. Base is the kind of protector who would absolutely guard your sleep and then tell you gently that you snore like a tired donkey, and it's really quite impressive. The thing about traveling under another name is that you start to notice how much of society is built on names. Not everyone reads papyrus. Not everyone knows the right words. Some people hold interpretation the way a locksmith holds tools, and some people hold food the way a careful hand holds a loaf. Isis knows this. She knows how quickly a rumor can become a net. So she moves through the world as someone ordinary enough to pass through doors without being recognized. And the scorpions keep their distance just enough to look like they belong to the night itself. When they arrive at one particular house, it looks like the kind of place that expects good things, a rich house. A gate that is heavy, not only in wood and metal, but in pride. You can feel it before you touch it, the way you can feel a closed mind before anyone speaks. Isis stands there with a child, and her need is simple. Water, shelter, a small mercy. The kind of mercy that costs almost nothing to the person giving it, which is sometimes why it is so difficult. Need in some homes is treated like bad manners, like showing up with muddy feet, like asking for help at the wrong hour when the lamp is low and the household has decided the world can wait outside. The gate remains shut. Not from danger, but from decision. And the night absorbs that decision the way dry sand absorbs spilled water, quietly, immediately. The scorpions feel the insult the way metal feels cold, clean, sharp, unforgettable. You might think creatures that small would not care about pride, but guardianship takes things personally. Protection, when denied dignity, can turn into anger. And anger looks around for a place to land, like a bird looking for a branch. This is the delicate part of the myth, and we will keep it gentle. Not because the story is pretending nothing sharp exists, but because you are here for sleep, and sleep does not need shouting. Still, the old stories were honest in their own calm way. They admitted that justice can be tempting when it feels like balance. When you see a closed gate, something in you wants to push back. Something in you wants to make the world symmetrical again. The scorpions, who are basically boundaries with legs, begin to gather their power the way a city gathers noise. Slowly, then all at once, they pull their venom into one sting. 7 into 1, concentrated, deliberate, not random violence, but a decision delivered through biology and myth. In Egyptian storytelling, even a sting can carry meaning, as if the night itself is writing a sentence in the air. A child is bitten, innocent, fragile, and this is the cruel lesson that myths do not always whisper nicely. Punishment slips. It misses its intended target. It lands on the wrong body. Even in a world full of gods and careful magic, consequences can still stumble like a tired person in the dark. The house changes tone in an instant. People who are proud become anxious. People who are secure become loud. Someone runs. Someone calls for help. Someone suddenly discovers that doors can, in fact, open. There is a kind of irony here that is so ancient it feels like dust. Mercy is often offered only when fear arrives to supervise it. The night, which had been quiet, now fills with the sound of panic trying to make itself useful. Isis does not celebrate the pain. She listens to it, and the listening changes the whole direction of the night. This is the part where her power is not thunder. It is precision. In Egyptian magic, naming is control. You name a thing, and you pin it gently to the page of reality. Isis speaks words that do not praise poison. They identify it. They acknowledge it. They treat it like a problem to be managed, not a drama to be performed. The spell works like careful hands. Identify, loosen, draw out, return the body to itself. It is the kind of methodical work that feels almost like medicine, if medicine also respected the idea that words are tools. You can imagine the scene without making it loud. A lamp lowered to give steady light. Water brought in a jar that sweats coolness on its surface. A cloth. A small bowl. The smell of incense, not because incense is dramatic, but because Egyptians liked the idea that good smells were persuasive to invisible forces. They believed the world had moods, and you could influence them. Isis speaks like someone filing paperwork in the universe, except the paperwork is sacred and the pen is a voice. And while she does this, the scorpions are there, quiet, waiting, like guards who suddenly realize the line they drew went too far. They are not monsters. They are bodyguards with a very specific job description. They protected a mother. They did what they thought protection was. And now they are being corrected by the person they serve. That correction is the real authority in the room, not punishment, not fear, correction. The ability to stop harm, even after harm has begun, is a power that does not need applause. Isis demands the Venom back, not as a request, but as a restoration. What was gathered can be ungathered. This is a strangely comforting idea, if you think about it slowly. The world is not always only forward. Some knots can be untied. Some damage can be pulled out like a thorn. Some endings can be rewritten, not by denying that something sharp happened, but by refusing to let it be the final word. The scorpions obey. Loyalty in the Egyptian imagination is also restraint. Guardianship is not the same as revenge, even if it sometimes gets confused in the dark. The child's breath steadies. The household learns something uncomfortable about divine strength. It is not always the strength to strike, but the strength to stop striking. The strongest force in the room is not punishment. It is the choice to end it. As the night settles again, the myth begins to feel less like a courtroom and more like a bedside lesson. Protection has two faces. It can defend a mother, and it can spill into the world like anger given permission. The same sharpness that keeps danger away can also make new danger if it forgets who it exists for. Isis holds both realities at once, danger and compassion, without pretending they don't share a doorway. In that balance, justice becomes a question, not a victory. A question you can hold lightly, like a small stone warmed in your palm. Egyptians were very good at holding contradictions without panicking. They lived with a river that could feed and drown. They lived with a sun that could bless and burn. They lived with gods who were tender and terrifying in the same mythology, sometimes in the same sentence. And in daily life, they tried to manage fear the way you manage heat, with shade, with water, with routine, a charm hung by the bed, a protective word spoken softly, a little figure of Tolraid, wide-hipped and watchful, guarding mothers and babies with the calm confidence of someone who has seen every kind of human worry and found it predictable. Even their calendars had a kind of practical magic. Certain days were considered safer, others more risky, as if time itself had moods. If you think that sounds a little like checking your phone's weather app before leaving the house, you're not wrong. The ancients also liked to know what kind of day they were walking into. And sometimes, when the world felt uncertain, they placed their trust in small, specific things. The right knot tied in linen, the right amulet touching skin, the right name spoken in the right order. Not because it solved everything, but because it gave the mind a handle. That is what Isis does in this story. She gives the night a handle. She takes a situation that could spiral and she studies it like a clay lamp refusing to flicker. She does not deny the scorpions. She does not deny the sting. She does not pretend the closed gate never happened. She simply guides the ending into a softer shape, as if smoothing wet clay with a patient thumb. So if you carry this myth into sleep, carry it like a lamp. Enough light to see, not enough to burn. Remember the scorpions as bodyguards, not monsters, small forms carrying large consequences. Remember that even Venom can be treated like a thing that can be named, managed, returned to silence. And remember Isis as the one who rewrites the ending, not by erasing harm, but by undoing it, calmly, precisely, like someone untying a knot that never should have been pulled tight in the first place. The river hushes. The lamp lowers. Somewhere, Ra's boat keeps its steady schedule through the dark, because even gods appreciate routine when it is late. The seven shadows return to their line, and their tiny legs scratch the sand like quiet ink again, writing nothing urgent, nothing sharp, just the soft record of guardianship learning to be gentle. And if your own thoughts still move, they can move slowly now, like reeds in a faint wind, like water carrying the last warmth of the day downstream, without needing to arrive anywhere at all. You wouldn't expect a goddess's bodyguards to arrive with sandals and spears and impressive resumes, but these ones arrive as 7 small punctuation marks in the night quiet, patient, and oddly professional. They don't announce themselves. They don't clatter. They don't even try to look dramatic, which is honestly very considerate when you're traveling with a child who has finally fallen asleep. They simply take their places behind Isis, low to the ground, moving like the dark part of the wind that slips between reed stems without bending them too hard. If you listen closely in your imagination, you can almost hear the tiniest scratch of legs in sand like a pen testing ink on papyrus before it commits to a sentence. They are sent as protection, not decoration, and that matters, because Egypt was extremely talented at making protection look decorative anyway. A charm could be beautiful, a carved eye could be elegant, a squat little bass could grin like an impolite joke and still be invited into the bedroom as a trusted roommate. Even Torit, wide-hipped, pregnant, part hippo, part lion, part crocodile, and entirely unbothered could stand on a household object like a reminder that childbirth was serious business and deserved a guardian with strong opinions and a sturdy shape. But the 7 scorpions are not the kind of protection you wear. They are the kind of protection that walks. They're an amulet that refuses to sit still on a necklace because it has places to be, and it does not want to be crushed under someone's blankets. Their names travel with them, and the names are not spoken loudly because names in Egypt are not just labels. They are handles. If you can hold the handle, you can move the thing, or at least speak to it in the right way. Names are power, but also responsibility, the way a key is power, but only if you don't lose it under the mat. Isis understands this better than anyone. She is, after all, the goddess who treats language like a toolkit, not for poetry competitions, but for results. The stories say she learned a secret name by patient methods, which is a gentle way of saying she did the divine equivalent of filling out forms until the universe sighed and stamped, approved. In that spirit, the scorpions' names are carried carefully because you don't throw keys around in the dark. So you can let the names be soft in your mind, almost like counting breaths. Tefin, Bethan, Mestet, Mestatef, Patet, Thetet, Matet. 7 names, each one a small thing that sounds like it belongs in the mouth of a sleepy priest who has been awake too long, translating dreams and trying not to yawn onto the papyrus. And if you're listening from somewhere comfortable, you can treat those names like tiny pebbles in a pocket proof that something protective is nearby. Even if you never need to take it out and show anyone, they move in a single line at first, and it is surprisingly disciplined. You might expect 7 creatures to scatter, to argue silently about direction, to do that uncoordinated thing groups do when nobody wants to be first. But guardianship is a kind of training. They keep pace with Isis the way a shadow keeps pace with a body, and they keep just enough distance to look like coincidence. Each one draws a small boundary between the mother and the world's cruelty, like a thin rope you can't see but somehow feel. And the world, sleepy and full of doors, tends to respect boundaries more than it admits. This is where the story becomes quietly funny, because the scorpions are both frightening and absurd in the most ancient way. They are tiny. They are serious. They have venom. They are also, if we're being honest, a traveling security team with no uniforms and no meetings. Imagine a group chat where nobody ever sends messages because everyone already knows what to do. That is the mood. They did not need a plan written on papyrus. They are the plan. And unlike most plans, they actually stick to it. Venom is their weapon, yes, but discipline is their real strength. Venom is easy to imagine. Sharp, quick, decisive. Discipline is harder. Discipline means not stinging when you could. Discipline means watching and waiting. Discipline means standing between danger and the vulnerable thing without needing applause for it. This is also, in a sleepy way, one of the most comforting themes in Egyptian myth. Power is often portrayed as routine. The gods do their jobs. They keep schedules. They repeat duties. The cosmos runs on timetables, like a very large household that would collapse if nobody remembered what day it was. Ra, for example, has a nightly boat route. He doesn't drift through the underworld on vibes. He travels with a crew, with a destination, with a whole set of responsibilities that sound suspiciously like shift work. Even the sun god has to clock in. And if a glowing solar deity can commit to a regular night commute, your own thoughts are allowed to soften a little and stop acting like every worry needs an immediate emergency meeting. Sometimes the most divine thing you can do is keep going steadily, like the scorpion's line, like the boat's path, like your breath, quiet in, quiet out, no drama required. And Egypt loved the idea that dangerous things could be turned into protectors. That's part of why the scorpion makes sense here, even if your modern brain wants to complain. Why guard someone with a creature that can hurt? It's like hiring a security guard whose main skill is, I can cause problems, but that's the point. Take the thing that bites and make it stand at your doorway. Put it on your side. Make it swear loyalty. Wear the threat like armor, or better yet, have it walk behind you like a tiny loyal shadow with standards. People did this in small ways all the time. They painted protective eyes on walls. They hung little figures that stared back at envy. They tied knots in linen because a knot is a decision you can touch. You can tie it, and you can untie it, which makes endings feel reversible. They tucked amulets into wrappings because if the body is traveling into the unknown, it's nice to pack thoughtfully. They wrote words on bandages because sometimes the best medicine is a sentence that says, calmly, this will hold. None of this was about dramatic heroics. It was about making life slightly less sharp. The scorpions seem to understand that philosophy. They don't parade. They don't rush ahead to prove anything. They simply follow Isis, tails curved in a way that suggests readiness without fuss. Their presence says, a mother is traveling, and the night has decided to take it seriously. That's it. No speeches. No banners, just a moving border of attention. And attention, in a world that forgets to be kind, can look a lot like mercy before mercy has even been officially announced. Because Isis is traveling under another name, the scorpions also learn to be discreet. They stay in the shadow of reeds, in the soft edge where water meets land, in the thin dark that lives between lantern glow and real night. They keep close enough to help, far enough to look like nature. If someone notices, it can be dismissed as the Nile doing Nile things, the way people dismiss their own uneasy feelings in the dark by calling it just being tired. It's always easier to accept a strange thing if you can pretend it's ordinary. Sometimes the path passes a small shrine, nothing grand, just a modest place where someone has left an offering, bread, beer, oil, incense. Egyptians loved ordinary offerings. They understood that gods, like people, respond well to steady attention. Not lavishness, not flattery. Just the same small courtesies repeated patiently. Bread is bread. Beer is beer. Oil is oil. The idea isn't to bribe fate. The idea is to soften its edges, the way you wrap a stone in cloth so it doesn't bruise your hands. If fate must be held, hold it gently. And while Isis walks, somewhere else someone is sleeping and dreaming, because Egypt also liked to treat dreams like messages that could be indexed. A dream could be good or bad in a way that sounds blunt, like a label on a jar. Dream of water, dream of teeth, dream of snakes. Dream of beer each image with a known taste, as if the night is a marketplace of symbols and you're expected to shop responsibly. There's something almost cozy about that. It suggests the world can be sorted. It suggests the mind can be translated. It suggests your inner chaos can be folded neatly into categories like linen. In that sense, these scorpions feel like a dream image made practical. 7 guardians following a mother. 7 sharp little punctuation marks. They carry a lesson that is almost too tidy. Protection is real, but protection must be managed. Power is useful, but power needs restraint. And restraint, in a world that can be unfair, is already a kind of mercy even before the story reaches the moment where mercy has to speak up. For now, the mood is quiet watchfulness. The scorpions are alert the way a cat is alert while pretending to nap, eyes half closed, ears doing the work. They notice doors, they notice faces. They notice how one house smells open and warm, and another smells perfumed and sealed. They notice pride before pride speaks, because pride has posture. Pride has a sound, even when silent. And the scorpions, who are basically tiny experts in boundaries, do not like the posture of refusal. They don't bite yet. They just register it, the way the skin registers a change in air before a storm. Isis keeps moving. The child stays close, warm like a small living loaf of bread, heavy in the comforting way only sleeping children can be. The scorpions keep their line. They keep their discipline. They keep their small, serious bodies moving like quiet ink across sand. And if you let your mind follow that line, you might notice your own thoughts begin to line up, till less scattered, less noisy, more willing to just go in the same direction for a while. If you're still awake, you can picture a tiny detail, the way a scorpion's body catches lamp glow for a second and then disappears. The way its shadow looks longer than it should because night always exaggerates. You can picture Isis's veil shifting with the reed wind and the 7 names tucked into the dark like tools wrapped safely in cloth. You can picture the line of guardians as a moving reminder that not all power is loud, and not all protection needs to announce itself like an advertisement. And the river keeps doing what it does. Water slides past reeds. The clay lamp steadies itself as if it has practiced. The village lights thin behind them. Ahead, there is another gate, another doorway, another test no one announces in advance. The scorpions do not know the whole future, but they know the next step. Isis does not need the whole future either. Sometimes it's enough to have the next step and the next breath and the quiet assurance that something loyal is walking behind you, small, sharp, disciplined, and oddly gentle in the way it refuses to sting unless it truly has to. The strange thing about Isis is that she never wastes her voice. She doesn't shout into the night as if volume could persuade the universe. She listens first, the way a careful healer listens to a room before touching anything, the way a scribe listens to the scratch of a reed pen and knows, from that sound alone, whether the ink is too thin. Even in a story that involves Venom and a child and a crowd holding its breath, she stays quiet enough that the night can keep being the night. The reeds still sway. The river still moves like a long, tired animal. The lamp still burns with that steady patience that makes you feel, briefly, like everything is manageable if you just stop panicking at it. And the listening matters because pain in Egyptian stories is not always treated like an emergency fire. Sometimes it's treated like a message that arrived with bad handwriting. Something happened. Something sharp entered the world. Now the question is not, who do we blame? But what do we name this so we can unmake it? That is the craft of reversal, and it begins with naming, which is almost boring in the most powerful way. There are no grand gestures, just precise attention. Isis looks at what has happened and refuses to call it fate, because fate is a lazy word if you're trying to fix something. She calls it venom. She calls it a decision that can be reconsidered. This is where Egyptian magic becomes oddly domestic. If you imagine it too dramatically, you miss the texture. The spells don't always feel like lightning bolts. They can feel like careful hands at the edge of a wound, like a knot being loosened one loop at a time. Isis does not praise the poison by fearing it. She does not treat the scorpions as monsters because she knows them as guards who lost their discipline for a moment. Even that is described softly, like a mistake made in a tired household. Someone snapped, someone was rude, and now a child is paying for it. The wrong body was hit. The night did that thing nights sometimes do, where an emotion lands on the nearest innocent surface. So Isis does what she always does. She makes the problem smaller by making it specific. She begins with words that identify, not words that dramatize, words that sort. In Egypt, that kind of speech is not just comfort, it's control. To name something is to place it within reach, to give it edges, to stop it from spreading into everything. This is why secret names matter in the myths, why Isis is famous for collecting them like a librarian collecting rare titles. If you know the right name, you can address the right thing. If you don't, you end up shouting at the dark in general, and the dark rarely feels obligated to respond. And there's something almost gentle about that idea. It means the world is not just random, it has handles, it has labels. It has a system, even if the system is sometimes unfair and occasionally inconvenient. It's like finding out your anxiety has an index, and the index is written in ink instead of smoke. If you can locate the entry, you can stop flipping through endless pages in your mind. You can go straight to the line that matters. The rest can wait until morning. The scorpions, meanwhile, are still there. 7 small shapes in the sand, suddenly too quiet, like children who realize they have broken something valuable. Their names are not just names now. They are evidence. Tefin, Bethin, Vestet, Vestatef, Petet, Dedet, Matet. A line of guardians who were meant to be boundaries, who briefly became harm. Isis doesn't erase them. She doesn't deny they exist. She turns toward them, and that turn is the beginning of mercy. Not the soft, sentimental kind. The practical kind that says, you will not do this again, and you will help me undo what you did. Because reversal in Egyptian myth is not pretend it didn't happen. Reversal is pull it back, like rewinding a thread through fabric, like returning spilled grain to a jar, like taking a word back before it fully lands in someone's heart. Isis speaks as if the venom is a substance that can be gathered, ungathered, and returned. That is the core belief. What was put into the world can sometimes be called back out, if you call it correctly and don't panic while doing it. If you imagine her voice here, it is not theatrical. It is steady. It is the voice of someone who has done difficult things calmly before. Isis is the goddess of the careful method. She is the patron saint of let me handle it. And in that moment, you can almost feel the crowd's fear shifting. People do that when someone competent enters a situation. They don't become happy. They become quieter. Their fear doesn't vanish. It changes shape, becoming smaller, more contained, like a candle flame protected from wind. There are always little details in these stories that keep them grounded, and that grounding is part of why they feel so sleep-friendly when you tell them slowly. You can imagine the sand under bare feet. You can imagine the smell of oil from lamps. You can imagine someone rubbing their thumb along a bead on a necklace, because hands need something to do when hearts are worried. You can imagine a protective amulet and Eye of Horus, perhaps pressed briefly against the child's skin, not because it is a miracle machine, but because it gives the adults a ritual to hold on to. Humans love rituals and moments they can't control. They are the mind's way of saying, I am not helpless, even when the body feels helpless. Egypt did rituals like this constantly. Wash, speak, anoint, burn incense, tie knots. Avoid certain actions until the day cools down. The goal was not to conquer fear by force. The goal was to manage fear with routine, the way you manage heat with shade. Temples, in some ways, were like night clinics, places where you could take a frightening sign and ask for a calmer interpretation. Priests could frame the chaos within divine order. Matt could stand behind it all like a quiet principle. Balance should be restored, not by drama, but by correction. Isis embodies that correction. She doesn't argue with what happened. She redirects it, and she does it with a kind of technical tenderness. Identify, loosen, draw out, return. Those steps feel almost like instructions you could find in a household manual. The ancient equivalent of remove stain gently, do not scrub. This is the part of magic people forget. Magic is often described as if it's about power. In Egypt, it is just as much about procedure. The universe in these stories respects the right process. And because you are listening slowly, you can let the process feel soothing instead of stressful. You can let the words be like warm water moving through tense muscles. You can let the idea of drawing out feel like exhaling, venom out, fear out, tightness out. The scorpion's mistake becomes a place where Isis teaches, without lecturing, that even sharp things can be made to obey balance again. There's also a subtle irony in the fact that Isis's authority is quieter than the scorpion's weapon. Venom is dramatic, it acts fast, it announces itself in the body. Isis's power is precise. It acts like skilled hands in the dark, hands that do not need light because they know what they are feeling for. In a way, she is the opposite of the sting. The sting is a sudden point. Isis is a steady surface. And here is a soft modern analogy that fits without waking you up. The scorpions are like a group chat that finally did something reckless at 2 a.m. And Isis is the one friend who wakes up, sees the messages and says calmly, delete that. Apologize. Fix it. Now. Not furious. Not dramatic. Just competent. It's the kind of competence that makes the world feel less chaotic. When she speaks to the scorpions, it's not a request. It's a correction. That difference is important. Isis does not beg for mercy. She embodies it. She demands the venom back because she understands ownership in a mythic sense. What was gathered can be ungathered. What was taken can be returned. She treats the venom like a substance that belongs to the scorpions, and therefore can be commanded by them if they are compelled to obey the right authority. And they do obey, not because they are suddenly sweet, because loyalty is also restraint, and guardianship is not the same thing as revenge. You can picture them pulling their venom into one sting earlier, concentrating power the way a city concentrates noise. Now picture the opposite. Picture that concentration being loosened, like a knot untied slowly so it doesn't snap. Picture the venom being drawn back, drop by careful drop, not as a spectacle, but as a reversal of direction. The story becomes a lesson in flow, harm moved outward. Now it is pulled inward, away from the child, back to the source. It is, in a strange way, the same motion as the river, just reverse for a moment water that usually goes one way being told, very politely, to come back. And the child's breath steadies, which in these stories is the most meaningful sign. Not thunder, not bright lights, breath, the simplest proof of life continuing. Egyptians paid attention to breath. They thought about it in rituals and spells, and the way they described the soul's movement. Breath is what the body does when it decides to stay. When the breath returns to rhythm, the room's panic loosens its grip. People stop gripping their own arms. Someone's shoulders drop. Someone blinks and realizes they were staring too hard. That shift is what Isis brings. Not a triumphant ending, but a quiet return to steadiness. And because this is a bedtime narration, we can linger in that steadiness like a blanket. We can let the scene soften at the edges. The crowd doesn't need to become a cheering crowd. They can remain a tired crowd. Egypt is full of tired crowds in its stories. People who have been working all day, who are now awake at night, because life has a habit of choosing inconvenient hours for its most important lessons. The lesson, of course, is uncomfortable, but it can be held gently. Protection can become cruelty if it forgets who it exists for. Venom can defend a mother. but it can also spill into the world like anger given permission. That is a very human truth wearing Egyptian clothing. It's the kind of truth that doesn't need drama to be real. It's the kind of truth that shows up in households too, where someone means well and still hurts someone by accident because tiredness and pride and sharpness have been left unmanaged. In that balance, justice becomes a question, not a victory. Isis doesn't let the scorpions call their action justice, because justice that hits the wrong body is just harm wearing a mask. Egypt understood masks. Gods wear them. Kings wear them. Rituals wear them. Sometimes harm wears them too. Isis, with her quiet authority, removes the mask by refusing to romanticize the sting. She treats it as an error to be corrected, not a punishment to be celebrated. And still, she does not destroy the scorpions. That's another soft detail worth noticing. In many myths, power proves itself by smashing. In this one, power proves itself by stopping, by turning the direction around, by commanding restraint. The strongest force in the room is not punishment, it is the choice to stop it. That is the kind of strength that feels like mercy, even if nobody uses the word yet. It is also the kind of strength you can borrow when you are trying to fall asleep. The strength to stop chasing thoughts, to stop replaying the day, to stop punishing yourself for every small mistake you can remember at midnight. Because your mind at night can behave a little like those scorpions. It can gather venom. It can pull worries into one sharp point. It can aim that point at the wrong target yourself, usually because it's tired and looking for somewhere to land. Isis's method, translated into something you can use gently, is to name the worry without praising it, and then draw it out by returning it to where it belongs. Not to your heart at 2 a.m., not to your pillow. Let the venom go back into the scorpion. Let the thought go back into the day. Let morning handle the paperwork. The river hushes. The lamp stays low and steady, as if it is also practicing restraint. The reeds continue their soft, repeating motion, which is basically the Nile's lullaby. The 7 scorpions return to their line because discipline is what they were made for, and now they remember. Isis remains veiled, not because she needs to hide forever, but because tonight is not about being seen. Tonight is about carrying life through a sharp world without becoming sharp yourself. And as the scene loosens and drifts, you can hold one image lightly, a small child's breathing steady again, a goddess's voice calm as a measured spell, 7 tiny guards quiet and corrected, and the sense that mercy in Egypt is not a soft cloud. It is a precise tool. It does not deny harm. It undoes it. It does not shout. It returns things to balance, one careful word at a time, until the night feels less like a threat and more like a place where the world can rest. Protection is one of those words that sound soft until you notice how easily it can become sharp. In the Isis story, it arrives on tiny legs, wearing the polite disguise of guardians, and for a while it really is what it claims to be. 7 scorpions in a single line. 7 small boundaries between a tired mother and a world that can be careless. It's almost comforting in a way that feels slightly strange, like realizing your door has 2 locks and both of them actually work. But the night has a habit of showing you the second face of things. And protection, if it forgets who it exists for, can start behaving like pride. It can start confusing defending with punishing. It can start thinking it is the main character, which is always a risky attitude for a bodyguard, whether you're a scorpion or a person in sunglasses who takes their earpiece too seriously. If you're re-listening from somewhere quiet somewhere, you can let the room stay still, then you already understand the main truth. Egypt kept returning to balance is not a dramatic victory. Balance is housekeeping. Balance is the slow work of putting things back where they belong. That's why Mat's feather is such a perfect symbol. It looks gentle. It is gentle. And yet it decides everything with the calm confidence of a scale that doesn't care about your excuses. So imagine the scene after Isis's reversal. The crowd doesn't explode into cheers because this isn't that kind of myth. The air just settles. The child's breathing has returned to a steady rhythm, which is the only applause the night needs. The scorpions, corrected and quiet, line themselves up again: Tefan, Bethan, Mestet, Mestatef, Betet, Thethet. Metet like a list read softly so it doesn't wake anyone. Their names sound almost like the shuffle of reeds, like small syllables that belong to the sand. And now the real lesson begins, not as a speech, but as a feeling in the room. The feeling that something can be both a defense and a danger. Venom can protect a mother and still spill into the world when anger is given permission. The same tool can build a wall or throw a stone. The same instinct can shield a child or harm a child. Egypt, for all its gods and spells and gold, was surprisingly honest about that kind of contradiction. It didn't pretend the world was tidy. It tried to make it manageable. This is why the myth is shaped like a warning folded in silk. It is not meant to bleed you. It is meant to be held. Isis carries two realities at once, danger and compassion, without pretending they don't share a doorway. She doesn't deny that the scorpions were sent as protection. She also doesn't deny what happened when protection got offended. In that balance, justice becomes a question, not a victory. A question you can ask quietly, the way you ask the night what time it is, without expecting it to answer out loud. Because in Egypt, even justice had rules. Justice wasn't supposed to be loud. It was supposed to be aligned. That alignment is met again, standing there like an invisible ruler measuring the straightness of a line. The scorpions broke alignment for a moment. They let insult become policy. They let pride speak louder than purpose. And the myth refuses to romanticize that moment. It says, gently but clearly, when you protect someone, you do not get to take your feelings out on the world. That idea sounds very modern, which is funny because it's also very ancient. People have always needed to hear it. You can almost picture a household listening to this story after a long day, the same way you might listen now, half under a blanket, your mind searching for something to hold that isn't tomorrow. In the corner, there's a lamp. There's always a lamp in these scenes because humans don't like complete darkness. Not because darkness is evil, but because darkness makes the mind start inventing extra problems, like an unpaid intern with too much enthusiasm. A lamp in Egypt is not just light. It's a sign that someone is still awake, guarding the edges of the room. Even sleep has its protective rituals. A little oil, a small flame, a whispered word, sometimes an amulet placed near the bed. The Eye of Horus is a popular choice because if you're going to be watched over, you might as well choose a symbol that looks like it's already watching. And yes, Egypt loved its symbols. The funny thing about the dream world is that it speaks in symbols too, which is why Egypt made manuals for dreams and treated the night like a place with rules. But myths like Isis and her scorpions also act like a manual, just written in story instead of entries. If you see protection turning into cruelty, do this. If anger is pooling, do this. If something sharp has hit the wrong body, do not worship the sharpness. Undo it. Undoing is a quiet kind of power. It's not as glamorous as creating. You don't get credit the same way. Nobody throws a festival for the day we prevented a disaster. Prevention is deeply unphotogenic. It's the reason no one writes ballads about locking the door on time. And yet, that's what most of life depends on. In Egypt, they understood that. They wrote spells for everyday problems. They tied knots for everyday fears. They carved protective images into everyday objects, like it was the most normal thing in the world to ask a tiny carved god to keep the scorpions out of your sandals. Which is a good reminder, by the way, that ancient life was full of practical discomfort. Sand gets everywhere, in places you did not invite it. Scorpions are not symbolic when you accidentally meet one. They are simply scorpions. Myth takes that real fear and turns it into a lesson you can carry without shaking. And this is where you can let the story soften into something like a bedtime oath. Not a dramatic oath, not the kind you swear with thunder. A small oath, the kind you might make when you're tired and you want your mind to stop biting itself. Isis's story offers you that. It says, carry this myth into sleep like a lamp, enough light to see, not enough to burn. That line is important because it describes the exact amount of intensity a night should have. Not zero, just controlled. You don't want a night so bright that you can't rest. You also don't want a night so dark that your thoughts start crawling around like anxious insects. Egypt's answer was always the middle. A steady flame, a quiet ritual, a calm voice naming things so they don't grow into monsters. So if you're still awake, you can subscribe if you want. Or you can let that thought drift downstream like a small leaf that doesn't need your attention. The Nile can carry it. The night can carry it. I won't know either way. What matters is that you don't turn the act of listening into another obligation. Egypt would not approve of making bedtime feel like paperwork, and Egypt was practically invented by scribes. Speaking of scribes, there's another small lesson hidden here. Discipline matters more than venom. The scorpion's venom is their weapon, but discipline is their real strength. That's true for most things that can harm. Words can be venom. Thoughts can be venom. Even protection can be venom if it's undisciplined. Discipline is what keeps the sharp tool in its sheath until it's needed. Discipline is what keeps the guard from becoming the threat. Egypt had endless ways of teaching discipline without yelling. They used calendars and rituals and offerings, like gentle reminders that the world has a rhythm and you should not fight it. The sun rises, the sun sets. Ra rides his boat across the sky and then, politely, takes his night shift through the underworld. Even gods keep schedules in Egypt. It's almost comforting. The universe is not chaotic, it's just busy. And in the underworld journey, Ray faces dangers, yes, but you don't have to hold that part tightly tonight. Just keep the image of the boat. The idea that even the sun uses a vessel. Even the sun needs support. Even the sun, in a way, accepts that it cannot do everything alone. That's a quiet kind of humility, and humility is another face of protection that remembers it is not the center of the story. The scorpions forgot humility for a moment. They felt insult. An insult is a very small thing that can become a very big thing if you feed it. A closed door, a refusal, pride disguised as politeness, and suddenly a boundary becomes a weapon. It's almost absurd how fast it happens. That absurdity is part of the dry humor Egypt offers you. The cosmos can be shaken by something as petty as someone being rude at night, which honestly is not that different from modern life. Entire days can be ruined by someone's tone in an email. The ancient version was simply more sandy. So the myth holds up a mirror and says, pay attention to small things. Not in an anxious way, in a careful way. The way you notice the flame on a lamp and adjust the wick so it doesn't smoke too much. Too much smoke makes the room unpleasant. Too much anger makes the world unpleasant. Too much justice makes the innocent pay. The correct amount of flame is enough to see the floor without turning your whole house into a beacon. That image, the wick, the flame, the adjustment, is a gentle micro hook you can return to whenever your mind starts pulling venom. Because your mind does that. It collects small worries into one sting. It concentrates power the way a city concentrates noise. It thinks it's being helpful. It thinks it's protecting you. If I worry enough, nothing bad will happen, it says, like a scorpion convinced it is a philosopher. But Isis's method is calmer. She names the poison without praising it. She draws it out. She returns it. She does not let panic become worship. That's the real bedtime teaching. Do not worship the forecast. Prepare, but do not kneel. Egyptians were good at preparation. They stocked jars. They stored grain. They tracked the Nile's moods. They built systems to survive the river's generosity and the river's stubbornness. They understood that the world is not controllable, but it is readable, like weather, like a seasonal calendar, like a dream book that says, very bluntly, if you dream of water, something is changing. If you dream of bread, something is stabilizing. If you dream of snakes, something is watching you, which is either ominous or just accurate, depending on where you live. And because this is bedtime, you can let those details drift through your mind like slow boats. Bread, water, knots tied in linen, the eye of Horus painted on a small piece of wood, base grinning somewhere in the corner like a tiny bouncer for your sleep. Taret, wide-hipped and watchful, protecting mothers and children with the stubborn seriousness of someone who has seen too much nonsense to be impressed by it. Protection in Egypt often looked funny. Base is literally funny. He's small and squat and he grins, and the grin is part of the spell. It says, I am not afraid. Humor is another discipline. It keeps fear from swelling too large. The scorpions, if they had a sense of humor, might have remembered their purpose sooner. But scorpions are not known for laughing. They are known for being extremely committed to the moment. So Isis becomes the adult in the room, the calm authority, the one who says, your job is not your pride. Your job is your job. Stop making everything about you. Return the venom. Return the balance. That balance is the myth's gift. It doesn't erase the sharpness of the world. It teaches you how to carry it. Remember the scorpions as bodyguards, not monstrous small forms carrying large consequences. Remember that something small can protect you. Remember that something small can also harm you if it forgets what it is for. That is the two faces of protection, sitting side by side like two jars on a shelf. One labeled safety, one labeled warning. And now, without resolving anything too neatly, the story begins to fade into the simplest, kindest part. The night continuing. The river continues. The reeds continue. The lamp continues. Isis continues her quiet traveling because myths rarely let her stop. She is always moving through danger without announcing it, always doing careful work in the background, like a protective presence you only notice when you realize you are not as scared as you were a minute ago. Somewhere, the 7 scorpions keep their line. They keep their discipline. They become what they were meant to be, a boundary, not a weapon. The crowd disperses slowly because people don't sprint home after something like this. They drift. They speak in low voices. They touch the child's forehead gently, as if confirming that life is still there. They do small rituals without needing to explain them. A bit of water, a bit of bread, a little incense, ordinary offerings, not to buy fate, but to soften its edges. And if you carry anything from this into sleep, carry it lightly. Carry it like a lamp. Enough light to see the path from your thoughts to your pillow. Not enough light to interrogate every shadow. Let your mind be protected without becoming cruel to itself. Let your worries be disciplined, not weaponized. Let the night have its quiet authority. Let the myth keep speaking in small, careful images, 7 tiny legs scratching sand like quiet ink, a veiled goddess who corrects without shouting, a feather that measures without judging, a boat that travels on schedule through darkness and comes out again. The lamp lowers. The river hushes. The scorpions remain, not as a threat, but as a reminder that even sharp things can be guided back into purpose. And the night, as always, keeps its mercy in a calm, steady way so calm that you might not notice when your breathing matches it, and the story, still unfinished, continues somewhere far away, drifting softly as if it could go on forever. You know what's oddly comforting about Egyptian magic, when you look at it up close and not from the dramatic angle people like to sell? It is rarely interested in mystery for mystery's sake. It can be almost procedural, not cold exactly. More like the calm voice of someone who has done this before and would rather not waste the night. In the story of Isis and the 7 scorpions, The moment after the sting is not a thunderclap. It's a quiet shift in the air, the way a room changes when a lamp's flame wobbles and then steadies again. People lean in. Someone sets down a jar too carefully. Someone forgets they were speaking. And Isis, who has been moving like an ordinary woman under an ordinary veil, becomes very still in a way that feels like authority without raising its volume. If you've ever watched a person who truly knows what they're redoing someone, tying a knot the same way every time, someone folding linen so the edges align without thinking, then you understand the mood. It isn't panic. It isn't spectacle. It's attention. Isis doesn't celebrate pain, and she doesn't flirt with it either. She listens to it as if pain is information, not a punishment. That is one of the strangest micro-lessons of these myths. The gods can be powerful and still behave like careful craftsmen. Especially Isis, she doesn't need the night to applaud her. She just needs the night to cooperate. The crowd, in some versions, calls out her name like a rope thrown across water. But the real magic is quieter than a name shouted. It begins with naming in a different way. Naming as diagnosis, naming as control. There's a very Egyptian belief tucked inside this. If you can name a thing precisely, it becomes less wild. A snake is less terrifying when it is a snake and not something moving in the dark. A fever is less tyrannical when it is counted, described, tracked. Even a curse, if you can identify its shape, becomes something you can work on, like a cracked pot. Like a frayed cord, like a bad mood that has gotten too much attention. So imagine Isis kneeling near the child, not dramatically, not like a stage, but like a person who has decided the ground is the correct place to be. The sand is cool under her knees. The air smells of reed water and lamp oil. Somewhere nearby, a clay lamp burns with the stubborn patience of something that does not know it is in a myth. The child's skin has that frightened heat that bodies make when they don't understand what is happening to them. And the adults, who should be adults, suddenly feel like children themselves because the night is not negotiable the way daylight is. The night feels like it has rules you didn't study for. The scorpions are there too, and if you picture them honestly, they are not towering monsters. They are small, quick, practical creatures. That's what makes them unsettling. Small things can carry large consequences. They have collected their venom into one concentrated decision because they are bodyguards who briefly forgot they were hired for protection, not revenge. And now the venom is in the world, where venom is always clumsy. Venom doesn't understand nuance. Venom doesn't care who deserves what. It goes where it can. Isis's first move in this kind of story is not to argue with the venom. She doesn't bargain with it. She doesn't flatter it. She doesn't speak as if poison is glamorous. She speaks as if it is a substance that needs to be returned to its container. And she does something that sounds simple, but is actually a whole worldview. She names it without praising it. This is the part that feels almost modern, if you let it. Not because ancient Egypt had hospitals the way we do, but because ancient Egypt understood the usefulness of calm. The spell is not fireworks. The spell is careful hands. Identify, loosen, draw out, return the body to itself. If you are still awake, you can almost hear the rhythm of it like a lullaby that pretends to be instructions. And it is, in a way, bedtime advice hidden inside a myth about scorpions behaving badly. There's also humor in it if you look gently. Imagine being a scorpion, proud of your perfect sting, only to be told by Isis, with the calm patience of someone correcting a child's posture, that you will be taking it back. Not later. Not after a debate. Now, the scorpions, who acted like a unit when they gathered the venom, are now expected to act like a unit again, but with discipline instead of indignation. It's almost like being asked to unsend an angry message you typed at midnight. Very relatable if you've ever had thumbs. And Isis's power, importantly, is not louder than venom. It is more precise, precision as a kind of softness. It doesn't thrash, it doesn't spill, it doesn't make the room shake. It makes the room align. That is why Egyptian magic often feels like a craft. It's closer to weaving than to warfare. It's closer to not work than to conquest. Even the words have the feeling of thread being pulled through cloth. Naming is the first thread. In Egyptian thought, names aren't just labels. Names are handles. If you know the handle, you can lift the pot without burning your hands. If you don't know the handle, you grip wherever you can, and then you drop it and call it destiny. Egypt tried not to drop things unnecessarily. Even fate, when it showed up, was treated like weather. You prepare, you adjust, you do not panic, and you definitely do not worship the storm as if it wants your admiration. So Isis speaks, and the crowd listens the way people listen when their own fear has run out of clever ideas. The words, and some tellings, move through titles calling on protective power, calling on divine order, calling the poison by what it is, and not what it wants to be. And there is something almost domestic about it, too. Domestic, not in the small sense, but in the sense that it belongs to the home. The home is where you deal with messes. The home is where you unspill what can be unspilled. The home is where you learn that most disasters are not dramatic. They are inconvenient. If you let your mind drift to the details Egypt loved, you can see the objects nearby. A water jar with a damp rim, a reed mat with woven patterns that catch the lamplight linen strips folded and refolded because someone cannot stop their hands from doing something. An amulet might be there, an eye of Horus, or a little Bess with a grin that says, "I have seen worse." Base is the kind of god who looks like he would bully a scorpion simply by making fun of it, which is an underappreciated strategy. Not every protector needs to roar. Some protectors just need to be embarrassing. And then the spell does what spells in Egypt often do. It behaves like careful hands. It identifies. It loosens. It draws out. It returns the body to itself. That last part is the softest and the strongest. Return the body to itself. It implies the body belongs to itself. It implies the poison is an intruder, not a new owner. It implies that even in a world full of gods and fate and sudden stings, the person is not a passive object. They are a home the night should respect. You can feel the rhythm of that idea settling. The crowd's shoulders lower by a fraction. The lamp stops wobbling. Someone's breath becomes quieter. The scorpions who were sharp a moment ago become something else, witnesses to their own correction. They are forced into discipline, which is what they were supposed to be all along. Venom is their weapon, but discipline is their real strength. That line is worth repeating gently, like a mantra you don't have to believe with your whole heart to benefit from. Discipline is the strength. Discipline is the protection that doesn't turn into cruelty. There is a small irony here that Egypt would probably appreciate. The scorpions thought they were delivering justice, but the result was messy. Isis delivers mercy, and the result is clean. Mercy in this story isn't soft in the weak way. It is soft in the accurate way. It knows where to apply pressure and where to stop. It does not pretend the sting didn't happen, but it refuses to let the sting define the whole night. And it's a very Egyptian refusal. The night can be sharp, and still the night must be managed. The gods can be dangerous, and still the gods must be handled with ritual and rhythm and a steady wick in the lamp. If you've been listening for a while, you might notice how often Egypt returns to the idea of undoing. Knots are tied and untied. Doors are opened and closed. Names are spoken and retracted. Even Ra, in his nightly schedule, is always traveling through darkness and coming back into light as if the universe is practicing the same motion over and over. Go out, come back. Lose, regain. Fray, repair. It's comforting, like a tide that doesn't care about your deadlines. And because this is a bedtime story, we don't have to rush to the moment where everything is fixed. We can stay in the gentler middle, where the spell is working like warm water soaking into linen. The child's breathing steadies not with a dramatic gasp, but with a gradual return to regularity. The kind of regularity that makes you realize how precious boring can be. Boring breath is the best breath. Boring is the whole goal. Boring is the miracle you don't write poems about because you're too busy living it. The scorpions, meanwhile, are not given the satisfaction of being hated forever. That's another quiet mercy. Egypt understood that tools can misbehave and still be tools. Protectors can forget themselves and still be corrected back into purpose. Even gods, in some stories, are corrected by other gods, as if divinity is a large household where someone always has to remind someone else not to put their feet on the table. So Isis's spell doesn't hide its purpose. It's not decorative. It doesn't flirt with ambiguity. It says plainly, what was gathered can be ungathered. What was pooled can be returned to its sources. The poison must go back to the creatures who made it, because they are the only ones who can hold it responsibly. It's almost like insisting people take responsibility for their own emotions, which, again, sounds modern and is also ancient, and is also very hard, and is also why myths exist. To say the hard thing in a way you can hold without bleeding. If your mind wants a micro hook to keep it gently engaged, take this one. In a world where everything can be a sign, Egypt still valued practical steps. They didn't only pray, they also cleaned. They didn't only chant, they also measured. They didn't only fear, they also organized the fear into rituals that could be performed even when you were tired. That's what this spell feels like, an organized response, a recipe for calm, an instruction manual for the moment when your thoughts start pooling into one sting. And if you're listening from a place that feels a little too bright with worry, you can borrow Isis' method without stealing anything sacred. Name what is happening without praising it. Call it what it is. This is fear. This is anger. This is the part of my mind that thinks protection means punishment. Name it, hold it, and then slowly return the body to itself, return the breath to itself, return the room to itself. The night doesn't need a grand ending. It needs a steady continuation. The lamp can keep burning in a controlled way, enough light to see, not enough to burn. The reeds can keep sighing. The Nile can keep moving like a long, patient sentence. Isis can keep being precise instead of loud. The scorpions can keep their discipline, lined up like quiet punctuation behind her, small shadows that have learned to stay in their places. And somewhere in that steady rhythm, the story remains open, as all good bedtime stories should. Not solved like a puzzle, but softened like a cloth. The poison is being undone. The night is being managed. The world is returning, little by little, to the gentle miracle of boring breath after breath, lamp after lamp, name after name, until the only thing left to do is keep drifting, quietly, as if the spell could continue forever. It's a quietly strange idea, isn't it? That mercy can sound like a command. Not a pleading kind of mercy, not the sort that asks permission and hopes for the best, but the kind that walks into a room and rearranges it without raising its voice. In the Isis stories, especially the one with the 7 scorpions, mercy doesn't arrive wearing lace. It arrives wearing precision. It arrives like someone who has found the mistake in the ledger and intends to correct it before anyone starts pretending the mistake is a tradition. If you re-listening from somewhere soft and late somewhere, the air has cooled and the world has stopped demanding your attention every 5 seconds, then you can imagine this moment in the simplest way. A clay lamp holds a steady flame. A jar of water sits nearby with that faint damp ring on the mat where it was set down. Linen is folded with the kind of care people only give to things they want to survive. And in the center of it, Isis does not perform. She simply takes over the way a calm person takes over when everyone else is too frightened to be useful. There is a particular Egyptian confidence hidden in that calm. It's the belief that many problems can be returned to their owners, that a wrong thing can be undone, that a mess can be gathered back into a bowl. even if it's spilled. Egypt loved bowls, by the way, bowls for grain, bowls for salt, bowls for incense pellets, bowls for small offerings that were meant to be ordinary enough to repeat. The world, in their imagination, was a place where repetition mattered, where the sun goddess schedule was so reliable you could almost set your sleepy little sundial by it. Rock goes out, rock comes back, the day behaves, the night behaves, and if something sharp happens in between, you don't need to worship the sharpness. You need to manage it. Isis manages it the way you manage anything that has gotten out of its proper container. She calls the poison what it is, not what it wants to be. She doesn't flatter it. She doesn't treat it like an interesting personality. She treats it like a substance like ink spilled on clean papyrus, like bitter resin that needs to be measured correctly, like a knot tied too tight in the wrong place. And then, very gently, she turns to the scorpions themselves, because in this story, the scorpions are not random villains. They are supposed to be protection. They are supposed to be the quiet bodyguards of the night. They are supposed to have discipline. You can picture them in a line: Tefin, Bethin, Mestet, Mestatef, Tetet, Thetit, and the Tet names that feel like small pebbles in the mouth. Names you could whisper without waking anyone. They are sent to guard a mother and a child, which is already a tender assignment if you think about it. A god's entourage could be lions, could be swords, could be thunder. Isis travels with creatures that fit under a hand, creatures that scratch the sand like a quill scratching a page. It's almost humorous, in a soft way, that a divine protector chooses bodyguards that look like they could be swept away with a broom. And yet, like all small things in Egyptian thought, they carry serious meaning. Small amulets guarded whole bodies. Small words guarded whole fates. A tiny widget eye on a bracelet could feel like a full security system if you believed in it with enough consistency. And now these small guards have made a large mistake. They pooled their venom into one sting, concentrating power the way a city concentrates noise. It felt to them like justice. It felt balanced. It felt clean. But Venom doesn't understand nuance, and justice without discipline is just a sharp impulse in a nice robe. The child was bitten. The wrong body received the lesson. And Isis, who has been moving through villages as if she is just another tired traveler, lets the veil of ordinary fall away in the quietest possible way. She does not reveal herself with fireworks. She reveals herself with authority. If you've ever watched someone correct a mistake without humiliating anyone, you know the mood. It's not angry. It's not theatrical. It's firm in a way that feels like a door closing gently, but absolutely. Isis doesn't scream at the scorpions. She doesn't curse them into ash. She simply states, in the language of Egyptian magic, that what was gathered can be ungathered, that what was sent can be recalled, that what was taken can be returned. There's a dry, almost modern comfort in that, like finding the undo button in a program you thought had none. Egypt, in its own way, believed the universe had an undo button limited, not infinite, but real enough to be worth trying. And here is where mercy becomes authority. Isis demands the venom back, not as a request, but as a correction. She speaks like someone who owns the rulebook and is slightly tired of watching people improvise with it. She reminds the scorpions, without needing to say it loudly, that guardianship is not revenge, that loyalty is also restraint, that protection is only protection if it remembers who it exists for. A protector who forgets this becomes a danger with good intentions, which is still just danger. The scorpions, in many tellings, obey, not because they are suddenly filled with shame in a dramatic, cinematic way, but because the hierarchy of the night has been clarified. They were sent by a higher power to serve a purpose, and Isis is the living definition of that purpose. She is the mother, the magician, the healer, the one who keeps the fragile things breathing. Her authority is not about dominance, it's about alignment. She aligns the scorpions back to their job the way you align a warped reed before you weave it. She doesn't break them. She straightens the work. It's almost comical, if you let yourself smile without waking up fully, to imagine the scorpion's venom being returned like borrowed tools. As if Isis is standing there with an invisible clipboard saying, "Yes, thank you. We will be putting that back where it came from." Egyptian temples ran on inventories. Lamps, linens, jars, incense, bread, beer, everything counted, everything measured, everything recorded. The gods were powerful, but they were also bureaucratic in the most soothing way. If you want a micro hook to keep your mind gently curious, imagine a sleepy temple scribe somewhere, writing 1-1 concentrated sting, return to sender with the calm satisfaction of a person closing a properly balanced account. And while we're here, take a soft detour, because Egypt loved detours that still return to the main road. Think of how often they treated the divine as scheduled. Ra has his solar bark by day and his night bark by night, and the underworld is not chaos but a route. A route with gates, a route with names, a route with beings whose job is to stand there and be exactly what they are. Even in the darkness, there is a system. The scorpions in that system are supposed to be standing there, beings quiet, sharp, disciplined. Their mistake was acting like emotion instead of function. Isis's mercy corrects them back into function. The child's breath begins to steady, not in a triumphant surge, but in a gradual return to the most precious boring rhythm. Boring is the goal. Boring breathing is the greatest luxury. The crowd, which a moment ago felt like a single anxious organism, starts to separate back into individual bodies. Someone remembers they have hands. Someone remembers the lamp needs oil. Someone remembers that worry is not the only thing you can do with your mouth. They begin to whisper practical questions, the kind of questions that feel like little anchors. Is the child cooler now? Is the breathing even? Is the sting swelling less? Egypt was not allergic to practicality. They were deeply in love with it. And Isis stays calm, because calm is part of the spell. This is another subtle thing the Egyptian myths teach. The tone matters. If you shout, you invite chaos. If you stay steady, you invite order. Order in Egypt is not just moral goodness, it's mata. It's the idea that the world can be balanced, that the feather can weigh the heart, that things can be measured instead of guessed. And Isis, by demanding the venom back, is doing Mata's work in a very local, domestic way. Not the grand cosmic judgment scene with a jackal-headed god and a monster waiting to eat a heart. Just a quiet correction in a courtyard with a lamp and a frightened family. There's also a gentle irony in the scorpions obeying. They were so powerful a moment ago, so certain in their pulled sting, and now they're being told to reverse themselves. It's like watching a proud storm get asked to be a breeze. It is like watching someone who's slammed a door get asked to open it again and close it properly. And because they are guardians, they comply. Guardians, when they are true guardians, can be corrected without collapsing. They don't need to be right all the time. They need to be faithful to the purpose. If you want another micro hook, a small one you can hold without waking up. Egyptian protective magic often involved tiny objects and tiny words doing large work. A small knot tied in linen could mean keep the bad thing out. A small figure of Bess could mean nightmares, please take your shoes off before entering. A little crocodile amulet might be worn, not because someone wanted to be dramatic, but because they lived near a river that occasionally produced opinions in the form of teeth. In that world, the scorpions are just another small protective technology alive. Yes, but still part of the broader idea that safety can be crafted. So when Isis says, in essence, give it back, she is treating Venom like an object that has been misplaced. It's not romantic. It's not poetic. It's almost administrative. And that is why it works so well in a sleepy story. Administrative mercy, paperwork compassion. The kind of kindness that looks like someone quietly fixing your mistake before it becomes a catastrophe and then never mentioning it again. The crowd learns something uncomfortable and soothing at once. The strongest force in the room is not punishment. It is the choice to stop it. That line can land gently if you let it. We're used to thinking strength is loud. Egypt often insisted strength can be quiet. Isis doesn't deny harm happened. She doesn't pretend the sting is fine. She simply refuses to let harm be the final authority. Mercy becomes authority, and in doing so it feels less like softness and more like structure. Structure is comforting. Structure is what lets you sleep. And as the night continues, it becomes less about the scorpions as individuals and more about what they represent. Protection has two faces, as the myth quietly admits. Protection can defend a mother. Protection can also spill into the world if it forgets who it exists for. That's the danger of any sharp tool, whether it as a scorpion sting or a harsh word or a fear or thinks it as being helpful. Isis holds both realities at once, danger and compassion, without pretending they don't share a doorway. That, too, is a very Egyptian kind of honesty, not dramatic, not despairing, just clear. Now the scene drifts, as bedtime scenes do. The river hushes, the lamp lowers. Someone pours water with a careful hand, listening to the sound as if it's proof the world is still behaving. The scorpions return to their line, not as monsters, not as villains, but as bodyguards who have been reminded of their job. Their tiny legs scratch the sand like quiet ink, and the sand receives the marks without complaint. Everything returns to its place as much as it can. If you carry this part of the myth into sleep, carry it like a lamp, enough light to see, not enough to burn. Remember that Egyptian stories often hide their gentlest advice in their strangest images. A feather weighing a heart, a sun god keeping a boat schedule, a fierce goddess being persuaded to nap with beard dyed red. 7 scorpions acting like a united committee until someone with real authority says, softly, no, that is not what we're doing. And in that softness, something steadies. The night doesn't need a triumphant ending. It needs continuity. It needs the kind of quiet repetition Egypt trusted breath after breath, lamp after lamp, correction after correction, until the mind stops gripping so hard. The child keeps breathing. The room keeps holding together. The scorpions keep their discipline. Isis keeps her calm, which is its own kind of power. And the story, like the Nile, keeps moving without hurrying, as if it could keep going long after you've drifted off, carrying mercy and restraint downstream in the same slow, steady current. Sometimes the gentlest thing in an Egyptian myth is also the sharpest, because it admits very calmly that protection can turn into cruelty if it forgets who it exists for. You can imagine that as a small object you hold in your palm, like a smooth amulet that feels reassuring until you notice it has an edge. The story of Isis and the 7 scorpions is often told like a neat lesson about compassion, but it's also a sleepy warning about guardianship itself, and the way a guard can become a threat the moment it starts enjoying the feeling of being necessary. If you're still awake right now, you can subscribe if you want, or you can let that thought drift away like a reed boat that was never tied properly. Either way, the Nile will not write you an email about it. And neither will I. Egypt had an entire culture built on writing things down, but even they understood that not every thought needs to be archived for eternity. Some thoughts are meant to pass through you and leave you lighter. Now let's stay in that quiet courtyard where the lamp has settled, where the crowd has softened back into individual silhouettes, where the child's breathing has found a boring rhythm again, the kind of boring that feels like a luxury. The scorpions are back in their line, small and disciplined, and the night is no longer shouting, it's humming. And in that hum, you can feel the truth the myth is leaving behind like a footprint in damp sand. Protection is not automatically good. Protection is a tool, like a knife that can slice bread or slice skin, like a doorbolt that keeps danger out or keeps kindness from entering, like a spell that heals or a spell that binds. Egyptians understood tools in a deeply intimate way. Their lives were full of objects that had to work correctly, jars that had to keep water cool, mats that had to be woven tight enough not to unravel, lamps that had to burn slowly without making the room smell like bitterness. Even a simple reed pen had to be cut at the right angle, or it would scratch the papyrus and make the scribe quietly angry. In a world like that, it makes sense that divine protection would also behave like an object, something that can be properly used, or improperly used depending on the hand that holds it. The scorpions, after all, were not sent to punish people for pride. They were sent to guard Isis while she moved through the human world under a veil of ordinariness. They were supposed to be quiet bodyguards, like the kind of security you barely notice until it is needed. Their job was to stand between a mother and whatever the world might throw at her. It became anger that wanted a landing place. It became justice that felt tempting because it felt balanced. It became that very human mistake where you confuse I can do harm with I should do harm. A sting is quick. A sting is precise. A sting is easy to justify in the moment because it feels like a reaction, not a plan. And yet in the story, it is very much a plan. The scorpions pool their venom. They cooperate. They concentrate power. They decide. That's what makes it feel like a moral lesson instead of a random accident. The myth isn't blaming the scorpions for being scorpions. It's showing what happens when protectors begin to act like judges. Judges in Egypt had their own sacred weight, and so did scales. You can almost hear the gentle creak of a balance beam when you think about Ma'at, Sfeather and the heart on the other side, and the idea that reality can be measured instead of argued with. But the scorpions are not the scales. They are the edge. They are the sharpness. And sharpness is useful only when it serves something softer, when it serves life, when it serves the child's breathing, when it serves the continuation of ordinary mornings. This is why Isis's role is so interesting. She doesn't simply forgive, she corrects. She doesn't treat the venom like a drama. She treats it like a substance that belongs somewhere else. In Egyptian magic, naming matters because naming is a way of putting a thing back into its category. Poison is poison. It is not justice. It is not necessary. It is not a lesson. It is poison. And once it is named correctly, it can be handled correctly, drawn out, returned, undone, ungathered. Isis does not pretend the harm didn't happen. She refuses to let the harm become the final authority. There's a soft modern analogy hiding here, so gentle one to jolt you. It is like noticing that a safety feature has become the problem, like a lock that jams and traps you inside, like a password system that is so strict it prevents you from accessing your own account, like an alarm that keeps screaming after the fire is already out. Protection that forgets its purpose stops being protection. It becomes noise. It becomes cruelty with a polite name tag. And the myth knows this. That's why it doesn't paint the scorpions as monsters. It paints them as loyal, disciplined, and still capable of misusing their power. That's a very Egyptian kind of realism. Egypt didn't always separate sacred from dangerous. Many of their gods carry both in the same body. Sekhmet can destroy and also heal. A crocodile god can be terrifying and also protective, depending on which side of the river you re on, and whether you re currently a fish. Even Ra, the sun itself, can be threatened at night, traveling through the underworld in a boat that requires guardians and spells and names to keep moving. If the sun needs protection, then everyone needs protection, and that protection must be managed carefully. Not worshipped blindly, managed. Imagine the underworld journey as a kind of nightly route with checkpoints. Gates that open only when the right names are spoken. being stationed like sleepy officials, not there to improvise, but to do their jobs. Egyptian myths often feel like the universe runs on procedure, and it's oddly comforting. Even the terrifying parts have rules. Even the darkness has an itinerary. And in that procedural cosmos, protection is not a mood. It is a role. A role with boundaries. Boundaries are so important in Egyptian thought that they turned them into symbols you could wear. Knots in linen, rings, seals. The widget eye watching back. A little figure of Bess with his lion face and squat body, guarding beds and berths and anything that happens in a room after the lamp is lowered. Base is one of those wonderfully specific protectors, like a deity designed for the exact moment you lie down and realize your mind has opinions. He's not cosmic. He's domestic. He's the god of please let me sleep. And even he can be drawn too intensely, too aggressively if you forget he's there to soothe, not to terrify. Protection is always a balance between presence and restraint. That brings us back to Isis holding two realities at once, danger and compassion, without pretending they don't share a doorway. She does not deny the scorpions are dangerous. She also does not deny they were meant to be helpful. She refuses the childish comfort of good guys and bad guys. The scorpions are bodyguards. Bodyguards can hurt people. That is the point. But if the hurt becomes casual, if the hurt becomes self-justifying, then the bodyguard becomes the threat. Isis's authority is the force that keeps their sharpness pointed outward instead of inward. You can think of that as a kind of maintenance, like maintaining a blade so it doesn't rust, like maintaining a boundary so it doesn't become a wall, like maintaining a lamp so it doesn't smoke the room into bitterness. Egypt loved maintenance. They maintained temples every day, washing statues, changing linens, offering bread and beer as if the gods had regular appetites and deserved consistent service. The divine was not treated as a one-time emergency. It was treated as a routine. And routines are what make sleep possible, because routines tell your nervous system that the world is not improvising wildly tonight. So the lesson of the scorpions is not never protect yourself. That would be silly in a world with crocodiles and scorpions and human pride. The lesson is protect yourself with purpose. Protect yourself without enjoying the power. Protect yourself in a way that still allows the world to be livable. The moment protection becomes cruelty, it stops being a shield and becomes a weapon looking for a target. And weapons are always hungry. They do not know when to stop unless someone with authority teaches them. Isis, in this myth, is that authority. And her authority is not loud. She doesn't perform a victory lap. She doesn't demand applause from the crowd. She doesn't build a monument to her own goodness in the courtyard. She simply restores the child's breathing, corrects the scorpions back into their role, and leaves behind a kind of quiet discomfort that is also a comfort. Strength can be the choice to stop, not the choice to punish, not the choice to prove a point, the choice to stop. If you want one more small micro hook to hold on to, here's a detail that feels like Egyptian life. Offerings were often ordinary: bread, beer, incense, water, not always gold and jewels and dramatic sacrifices. Ordinary things, repeated. Even in temples, even in myths, the sacred often smells like bread and smoke and a cool jar of water. So when Isis fixes the poison, it's not a spectacle. It's closer to ordinary medicine: identify, loosen, draw out, return. The kind of work that doesn't look impressive but keeps bodies alive. The kind of work that makes the next morning possible. The kind of work that doesn't need a grand ending because it's part of a continuous care. And care in Egypt was often imagined as a set of small actions. Tie the knot, say the name, place the amulet, close the door, light the lamp, speak gently to the frightened, keep the sleeping space calm. You can almost see the bed area in an Egyptian house: woven mats, maybe a headdress curved like a crescent for the neck, a small lamp guarding the corners, a charm hung where the eye can land on it in the dark. It's not so different from the way people arrange their rooms now, if you think about it. A glass of water near the bed, a charger within reach, a small light that doesn't shout, a routine that says, I have prepared for the night. The difference is that Egypt added gods to the routine the way we add settings and apps quiet helpers. Not necessarily dramatic, just present. The scorpions, then, are a part of that bedtime technology. But the myth insists bedtime technology must be guided by wisdom. A guard without wisdom is just a creature with power. A lock without wisdom is just a trap. A warning without wisdom is just anxiety in a new costume. Isis is wisdom in the form of a mother who refuses to let fear run the house, so the night settles further. The crowd disperses the way crowds do when they realize they are no longer needed. Someone murmurs thanks, perhaps, but not loudly. Someone checks the lamp oil, because the lamp is still a practical responsibility. Someone looks at the scorpions with a new kind of respect, not the respect of fear, but the respect of understanding boundaries. And the scorpions, small as punctuation marks in the sand, return to their disciplined stillness. Their legs scratch softly, their shadows are thin, their danger is contained by purpose. If you carry this scene into sleep, carry it like a quiet rule you don't have to recite out loud. Protection should be enough light to see, not enough to burn. It should be a lamp, not a wildfire. It should be a door, not a prison. It should be sharp when it must be, and gentle the moment it can be. And if something in you feels sharp, some protective instinct, some old anger, some habit of guarding your heart like it is a treasure room, then you can let Isis, as kind of authority, visit that part of you very softly and remind it what it's for. The river hushes, the lamp lowers, the air cools. The world, for now, stops demanding explanations. And the story keeps drifting, not toward a grand conclusion, but toward that slow, steady continuation Egypt trusted, breath after breath, night after night, a quiet correction whenever protection forgets itself, until the room becomes calm enough for sleep to take you without resistance. If you carry this story into sleep, you don't have to carry it like a warning. You can carry it like a lamp that has learned good manners. A lamp that gives you just enough light to recognize what you're holding, and then politely stops trying to be the sun. In Egypt, light was never only light. It was also timekeeping, it was also safety. It was also a small promise that the room had edges, and that the edges were being watched. And still, the best lamp was the one that didn't argue with the night. It didn't fight the dark. It simply made the dark softer around the corners, so the mind could relax and stop inventing shapes. That is what the myth asks you to do with sharp things. With scorpions, with venom, with any kind of protection that could become too eager. It asks you to let them exist, but not to let them take over the room. The 7 scorpions in this story are not monsters. They're bodyguards. That is already a strangely tender idea, because it admits the world is rough enough that even a goddess traveling as a tired mother might need escorts. And it also admits something quieter, something almost domestic. Escorts can make mistakes. Protection can forget its purpose. A guard can start to enjoy the feeling of being feared. A shield can start to behave like a blade. None of this needs shouting, it just needs noticing. So you remember them as bodyguards, not monsters? You remember their names the way you remember the names of tools you want to use? Correctly. Tefin, Befin, Mestet, Mestatef, Patet, Thetet, Matet. They sound like small taps on wood, like careful feet moving over sand. You can imagine each one as a tiny shadow that knows how to stay in line. They do not brag. They do not perform. They do not need applause. Their power is in discipline and holding still when holding still is the safest choice. And the myth, very gently, teaches them that lesson the hard way, because myths often prefer a demonstration over a lecture. It's almost funny, in a dry way, how human the scorpions behave. They are protective until their pride is scratched. They are loyal until their loyalty becomes possessive. They are ready to defend until defending begins to feel like punishing. If you've ever watched a simple thing become complicated, like a rule that was meant to help, but then starts to harm, then you understand the scorpions without needing to be bitten. It's like a lock that keeps you safe right up until it traps you in your own house. It's like a warning alarm that is meant to protect you, and then continues screaming long after the danger has passed, because it doesn't know how to stop being important. Protection wants to feel necessary. That is its little secret. And the myth treats that secret like a small ember, useful for warmth, dangerous if you cup it too tightly. Egypt had a deep love for boundaries, and it's one reason their magic feels oddly comforting. A boundary is something you can touch. A boundary is a line you can maintain. You can tie a knot. You can seal a jar. You can paint a protective eye. You can place an amulet on a child's chest, the way you place a hand over a candle flame close enough to feel the heat, not so close that you burn. They wear protection as jewelry, which is a very calm way to admit that danger might be routine. Not dramatic, routine. The kind of routine you respond to with small preparations, not panic. A wedget eye cut from faience. A little figure of Bess with his squat body and fierce face, stationed near the bed like a bouncer at a very quiet club. The kind of club where the only rule is, please sleep. Bess is a good companion for this last drift into silence, because Baze lives in the doorway between myth and bedtime. He isn't out there wrestling cosmic snakes for the sake of poetry. He is here in the room, making sure the night doesn't bully you. He is the god of soft domestic protection, the kind that doesn't need to sting anyone. And even Baze, in the way he is drawn, teaches you something about balance. His face is fierce, but his job is gentle. He is meant to scare off harm, not to scare you. Protection should be directed outward, not inward. Otherwise, it becomes a second threat living in the same room. This is why Isis matters so much. Not because she is powerful in a loud way, but because she is powerful in a corrective way. When the scorpions pulled their venom into one sting, they did something that felt like justice because it felt like symmetry. You deny the mother help, the night answers you back. It's a simple equation, but the equation hits the wrong body. A child is bitten, and that is the moment the myth becomes painfully realistic without becoming dramatic. Punishment slips, it overshoots. It lands on whoever is smallest, whoever is nearest, whoever cannot argue. The myth does not linger in horror. It simply tells you the truth and keeps going, the way the Nile keeps going even when something ugly happens on the bank. Isis does not celebrate the sting. She does not call it righteous. She treats it like a mistake that must be undone, and that is a very particular kind of mercy. It's not sentimental mercy. It's the mercy of someone who knows that life is maintained by repair. The spell she speaks is not a performance. It is closer to careful hands doing practical work. Identify, loosen, draw out, return. In Egyptian magic, naming is control, and you can feel that here. Poison is poison. Not justice, not lesson, not destiny. Poison. Once it is named correctly, it can be moved correctly, returned to the scorpions, taken out of the child's body, as if the body is a house and the poison is an uninvited guest. There's something sleepy and comforting in that idea. The world can be corrected. Not always, not perfectly, not with a grand ending, but sometimes, with the right authority, harm can be ungathered. Isis demands the venom back, and the scorpions obey. And the obedience is not humiliation. It is guardianship returning to its proper shape. It is protection remembering its job. It is the sharp thing agreeing to be guided by the soft thing. If you're still awake as you listen to that, you can let it sink into you slowly. Real strength is not the ability to harm. Real strength is the ability to stop. Egyptians built entire spiritual systems around stopping the wrong thing and continuing the right thing. They imagined the sun god Ra traveling each night through the underworld in a boat, and the journey is not romantic or chaotic. It is scheduled in a way. There are gates. There are names. There are beings stationed like quiet officials who want the correct password and nothing else. The universe runs on procedure, and procedure is soothing when you're trying to sleep, because procedure implies predictability. Even the darkness has rules. Even the most frightening parts of the cosmos have a map. And if the cosmos can be mapped, then a night in your own room can be mapped too, into breath after breath, into one slow thought after another, into a drift that doesn't require you to solve anything. If you like, you can picture Isis the way the myth wants you to picture her here, not as a statue in full ceremonial glory, but as a presence that moves through a crowded human space without needing to dominate it. She is the person who kneels by the child and makes the room quieter simply by refusing to panic. She speaks words that are precise. She does not flatter the poison. She does not negotiate with the scorpions as if they are entitled to their anger. She corrects them. And correction is a form of love that doesn't always feel warm, but always aims at life. The crowd learns something uncomfortable, the way crowds do. They learn that power without restraint is not admirable. They learn that protection must be accountable. They learn that mercy can be authority, not weakness. And now the night is calming again. This is the point where the story could end with a tidy moral, but we don't have to do that. Endings are too sharp for sleep. Instead, we let the myth become a small object you can set down beside the bed. Like a charm that doesn't glow. Like a knot tied in a strip of linen, not to bind you, but to remind you that some things can be held in place gently. In Egypt, they love knots because knots are humble magic. A knot says, I have used my hands to make order. A knot is not a battle. It is a tiny decision repeated. You can make tiny decisions now too. You can decide that whatever sharpness you carried today, irritation, vigilance, the need to defend yourself from imagined arguments, can be guided into stillness. Not erased, guided, like the scorpions returning to their lime. You can let your mind keep its protective instincts, but ask them to behave like bodyguards with discipline, not like judges with hunger. You can let them stand at the door, not sit on your chest. You can let them watch the outside world, not interrogate your own thoughts. The Egyptians also had a habit of turning anxiety into objects they could manage. That's one reason amulets are everywhere in their world. Fear is exhausting when it stays shapeless. It becomes lighter when it takes a form you can hold. A little eye, a small god, a carved sign. Even writing something down, as if the page can carry a bit of your worry so your body doesn't have to. It's almost comically practical, and that practicality is part of what makes it soothing. You can imagine an ordinary house along the Nile with woven mats, a cooling jar of water, a small lamp guarding the corners, and maybe, near the sleeping place, an amulet that isn't dramatic at all, just present. Like a quiet promise that the night has been prepared for. Preparation is a gentle kind of faith. You don't prepare if you think the world is pure chaos. You prepare because you believe your small actions matter. You prepare because you believe the night can be shaped into something livable. The myth of the scorpions at its softest is about that. Isis doesn't fight the whole world. She doesn't rewrite human pride. She doesn't abolish hunger or arrogance. She does one precise thing. She undoes a sting and corrects her guardians. And that is enough to let the night continue without turning into a catastrophe. Sometimes the most divine thing is simply preventing the worst outcome from becoming the only outcome. If you want more small, sleepy microhook before you drift further, you can remember how the Egyptians categorized dreams, and signs, how they liked lists and labels, as if the universe could be filed. They could write that a certain symbol is good and another symbol is bad, and then quietly complicate it by saying sometimes meanings flip. It's almost charming. the cosmos as paperwork, the underworld as a series of gates with correct names, the moral life as a feather and a heart. The point is not to be perfectly calm all the time. The point is to have a system for returning to calm, a system for correction, a system that doesn't require drama to function. So let the myth become your small system for tonight. Not a rule you must obey, but a mood you can borrow. Enough light to see, not enough to burn. Enough protection to feel safe, not enough to feel trapped. Enough story to keep the mind gently curious, not enough story to wake you with suspense. If you're still listening, you can let your attention rest on small details that don't demand anything from you. The tiny scratch of scorpion legs in sand, like quiet ink, the steadiness of a clay lamp, the hush of the river as if it is practicing silence. The way a crowd becomes a background sound and then fades into separate footsteps and then into nothing at all. And if some thought tries to sting some memory, some worry, some sharp little sentence your mind repeats because it thinks repetition is protection, you can treat it the way ISIS treats poison. Name it plainly, not dramatically, not as destiny, just as a thought. Loosen it. Draw it out of the center of your body and let it sit on the edge of the room like an object you can pick up tomorrow if you still want it. Return your attention to what is boring and safe. Breath in, breath out. The simple movement of air that needs no myth to justify it. The river hushes, the lamp lowers. The 7 shadows return to their line, patient and sharp, and now disciplined again. Isis does not need to announce that she is leaving. She simply moves on because mothers do that, and because the night is long, and because the world is full of small emergencies that are best handled quietly. And the story does not close its door with a click. It leaves the door slightly open, just enough for cool air, just enough for the sound of water, just enough for the possibility that correction is always available, softly, whenever protection forgets itself. The night keeps its mercy, and you can let your eyes grow heavy inside that mercy, as if sleep is not an ending but a gentle continuation.